On December 25th, many will hear the story of Yeshua's birth. A story that is probably more a theological narrative than a historical report, shaped to interpret and give meaning, rather than to provide precise facts. And yet, it is precisely this story that has touched people for centuries. To call it a theological narrative does not mean that it is arbitrary or without value. It means that it is written to express faith and interpretation. The evangelists draw on familiar images and motifs from the scriptures and traditions of Israel and weave them into a new story in order to say something about who God is and what Yeshua's life means. The primary question is not, what exactly happened, but what does this mean? It is theology in the form of a story. We meet a young, poor, betrothed couple. Mary, pregnant outside of marriage, vulnerable to shame and social exclusion. Joseph, who chooses to stay, even when he does not understand. There is no room for them at the inn. The child is born in a stable, among animals and the smell of hay, and soon afterward the family must flee as refugees to Egypt, driven away by the fear of power. All this is hardly history in the modern sense. The Gospels do not give us a neutral report, but a story meant to show a way, to point to a pattern. This is what God is like. This is how God acts. And yet there is something deeply beautiful here. Not because the stable is romantic or because poverty in itself is noble, but because the story consistently looks at the world from below, from those who have no power, from those who have no security, from those for whom there is no room where others would have it. The shepherds, not priests or scholars, are the first witnesses. A young woman without status carries the hope. A child without protection becomes the sign of a new beginning. This is the perspective of the poor. Not only economic poverty, but human vulnerability, to be dependent, exposed without guarantees. Perhaps that is why the story continues to live on, even for those who no longer read it literally. It says that the divine, if it exists, does not first appear in palaces, but in what is fragile. Not in power, but in a life that can so easily be broken. In this sense, the birth story is a protest against empires that measure strength, against systems that turn people into surplus. It whispers that dignity does not come from above, but is already present in the one lying in the manger. If this is a theological narrative, it is one that carries weight, an interpretation meant to shape how the world is seen. Who matters? Where hope can be found. So perhaps December 25th can be a day not to defend a miracle, but to listen to the ethical power of the story, to the view from below, to the voices that otherwise are drowned out. And one final thought. Yeshua was almost certainly not born on December 25th. The gospel descriptions of shepherds in the fields have led some to suggest an autumn birth. But if this story is a theological narrative rather than a precise historical report, then it could just as well have taken place at any time of the year. In the Roman world, December 25th was closely associated with the winter solstice, the turning point when the light begins to return. It was also celebrated as the birth of the unconquered sun. Later calendar adjustments moved the solstice to around December 21st, but the date remained. So when the early community chose December 25 as the day to remember Yeshua's birth, it was not to fix a historical moment, but to place the story within the rhythm of darkness and returning light, a powerful symbol for hope and new beginnings. And even though the Gospels in no way encourage marking the birth of Yeshua with a special day, the story itself is so moving that a remembrance took shape and became tradition. Not because it was commanded, but because people could not let the story go. Thank you for listening. If these reflections resonate with you, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. You are warmly invited to take part in the conversation, and until next time, may you walk in peace, and may you be a blessing to others.